Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Goldster Inside Story. I know that Adam took very good care of you yesterday, and I hope you had a great time yesterday. I am here today with Richard Hammomnd, who is the author of this new book, Green Traveller. And he also has a kind of company and a website called The Green Traveller as well, which we're going to talk about a little bit more as we go on. And Richard and I have just been catching up because, full disclosure here, we used to work together too many years ago to admit, when we were both straight out of university working for a publishing company called Dorling Kindersley. And I know once when somebody was talking about Dorling Kindersley, somebody, I don't know if they're here today, had actually worked there too. So Richard and I haven't seen each other for years. So it's been absolutely lovely to catch up. Welcome, Richard. It's so great to have you here on Goldster today.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
To have you here as an author. Conscious adventure that doesn't cost the earth. This is your subtitle. So we're going to talk about this, but I'm going to start actually with saying I know that you began as a book editor, because so did I. So tell us how you got into wanting to write and what it was like, what you worked on as a book editor, and how it was that you decided to make that move towards.
Well, sort of going back even before that, I did a publishing postgrad up in Stirling. There weren't many postgraduates, like masters in publishing. There was one in London, one in Oxford, and I thought, well, I'll probably eventually end up being in London because most publishing is based there. So I thought, why not go to Scotland, for 9 months? So it was great. So I went up to Stirling and did this MPhil in publishing, and we learned a lot about making paper, and also to do copyright law and all sorts of everything to do with publishing. It was a great little standing. And after that, I got a little graduate job at HarperCollins broadcasting, which I used to sort of write little summaries of books so they could sell them as options for films. And I did that for 3 months in the end. It was great. And that sort of led into, it's great to have that first break, isn't it? You just need to be working somewhere for the next job interview to be able to say that. So that's how I got to Dorling Kindersley. But my sort of heart was in natural history, really, and travel. That's kind of what I love doing, because I've kind of done quite a lot of traveling and done a natural history degree and the rest of it. So, so Dorling Kindersley, that's what it was. But I actually applied for a job at BBC Wildlife magazine. Actually, it was after Dorling Kindersley. I worked for several publishing houses: Dorling Kindersley, New Holland, ANC Black, very sort of specific natural history publishers. I went for a job at BBC Wildlife, and I as a section editor, and she said, sorry, we actually wanted someone with a bit more of a newsy background. So they employed a former journalist, but they said keep in touch. And the company that I was working for at the time, New Holland, was doing we'd done a book about national parks of Malaysia. And there was an ecotourism conference happening in Malaysia. And the guy who'd helped with all the photography for the book said, why don't you come to this ecotourism conference? You've worked on the book for so long. And often these big, huge, as these huge, great illustrated books, you work on them for at least a year, sometimes more. So anyway, so I wrote back to the editor at BBC Wildlife saying, yes, you said keep in touch. Actually, I'm about to go to the World Ecotourism Conference in Borneo. Would you be interested in in me doing some research or something? She said, yeah, sure, I'll give you £80 and go on behalf of us and see if you can dig up any stories.
Wonderful.
And then that was the beginning, really, of me shifting from editing other people's work to me thinking, gosh, I've got to do some research and come up with a story. And
story that you came up with from that conference.
Well, it wasn't. She did me a great favour. Ros Kidman Cox was the editor then, and she what she gave me wasn't sort of £80 really. It was more the fact that when I turned up to this conference, my name badge said Richard Hammond, BBC. They didn't even book me. So I felt like I was the Director General, and I met David Bellamy, and there's all these kind of Americans and Australians, and he was really the only other person that I think was living in the UK at the time from Britain. And so he came over to me and we sort of chatted, and he said, you must meet and I met all these incredible people, and I was incredible, including this guy who ran this brilliant place called Eco Beach in Western Australia with lots of local sort of indigenous people, and it just seemed like the future. That was the future of a really good sort of thoughtful tourism. And so when I came back, I thought I want to write about this. I didn't no longer just editing other people's work, which I really enjoyed. I loved the job. But I felt like I wanted to write something about it. Wrote to BBC Wildlife, and they published a piece. It was a very small piece, and that was it. I was away. And you just always need that first little break, don't you? And whether it's editing or writing,
I used to work for the BBC on their website, and just having that BBC pass was so exciting. I used to love it. I miss working there because it was such an amazing place to work, and I just thought it was a wonderful thing to be associated with. But we have had a little comment in the chat from Jane, who says that it was she who worked for Dorling Kindersley, and what a great company. So
yes,
Those of us who worked there in the past have extremely fond memories of it because it was a really inspirational place to work, wasn't it? And I don't know about you, but I remember Peter Kindersley giving his talk to the new joiners, and I just was bowled over by how inspirational he was. And I think you felt the same about him, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can always tell what the business is like, but what the boss is like. And, the people that he employed and the people that they then subsequently employed, including our bosses down in the Richmond office, were all great. And there was such a great atmosphere. It's like, do you remember we used to play rounders at lunch? I always remember that. And sometimes after work, it was that kind of family spirit. And, and the books, I mean, so recently I went to Peter Kindersley's, that's got a farm now. I went to visit it, and in there's a room. They have a sort of an off-grid boathouse. I went to kind of review it for the book, actually. But I met his daughter, actually the colleague there who introduced me to the daughter over the phone, and she described various things that they've been doing, and then told me to have a look at this room. And I went in there when I went to review the boathouse, and it's a room that's full of every single book that Dawn Kindersley's ever published.
Amazing. So our names are in there.
Yes, I know.
Well, I worked on one of my favorite ever projects. I worked on the Whales, Dolphins and Porpoises Eyewitness Guide. And as a few people on Goldster know from having seen me talk on PPG when I interviewed Bernard Purrier from the Whales and Dolphins Conservation Society, that's my absolute love. And I have been whale watching in many places around the world, and almost every whale watching boat has that book on it. And I always, in my party piece where I go, oh, look, there's my name, I'm in this. And it's just, as a kind of junior editor, but that still remained one of my most important jobs, because to me, that was just what I wanted to be doing. So Jane was lucky enough to be Peter Kindersley's PA. I thought that's what you'd said, Jane. Yeah, and I'm glad that you thought you were lucky enough. So he obviously was a nice person as well, just as we thought that he was. So tell us about Green Traveller, before we get on to the book, about setting up the website and everything.
Yeah, so just to sort of progress on from the BBC Wildlife, the kind of writing a piece, and then I met someone who had set up a website that was all about news for the travel industry. It's called Travel Mole, Mole unearthing the news, and I did that for a few years, and she left it actually. She worked for Footprint Guides. She wrote many of their Asian guides to Asian countries with her husband, and she went back to Asia to update the guide to Laos, I think it was, and was away for months. So I ended up taking over and ran that, and started writing about sustainable tourism issues and things that were going on. And then that sort of bumbled away for a couple of years. And then the Observer got in touch, they'd seen something, said, would I be able to come in just to cover a shift there for, which I kind of thought was like an ongoing thing. And actually I went for a week, and then they said they'd got someone employed to come and do it, as staff. But I was in the Observer office, and the Guardian travel editors, I think, saw me writing there and said, would I be interested in writing something for them? And next thing I knew, I was writing a little column in the Guardian, which is monthly, about greener holidays. And it was called, I think it was called Green Lifestyle, and then it called Clean Breaks. And but they used to, it was monthly, and then it became weekly. And lots of people were interested, and especially at the Guardian that time, it was people, this is sort of 10 years ago, it was people at the tipping point. They were kind of interested in what was happening in the lifestyle area, but they wanted to know how they could travel in a way that was green. And at that time, there wasn't really that much information around about what was going on.
Yeah.
But of course, I used to write this column. I used to put our email addresses at the bottom of every article. And then so people used to write into me saying, your column is a disgrace, you're promoting, I was sort of writing about all sorts of places. And some places people didn't really like, or they were far-flung areas, and they thought, you can't fly to Costa Rica and stay in an eco lodge because it's not very green. And so I set up greentraveller.co.uk really as a forum, for people to debate the issues, because I didn't have enough time really to reply to everyone. And I thought that was interesting, and I got so much interest in it. I mean, particularly actually, the most popular read article was about cargo ship travel, going by cargo boat. It's a long way. How can you actually go to the States without flying? You can go on a yacht, or you can go on a cargo boat. These cargo boats go all the way around the world. So
I've always been intrigued by the idea of doing that, actually.
Yeah. In fact, I think some writers' retreats are on the cruise ship that goes to the States. Things like an 8-day crossing, and you can go as a writer, you're away from the distraction. Yeah.
Well, I've just posted the link to Green Traveller, and I've also put I found your clean breaks, and I've put those on there. When you said people were saying to you, your column's a disgrace, I thought it was because they thought you were the other Richard Hammond, and they were going to be writing about green travelling when you're doing. Yeah, but that's not.
There have been a few confusions along the way.
I seem to remember once you were booked, weren't you? I think I remember you saying through your speakers agency somebody booked you, and you didn't want to let them know because they'd have to give you a cancellation fee or something.
Well, they said, could I hang around later and play up the Yorkshire card? And I was like, what Yorkshire card is that? I think he was born in York or Yorkshire.
Oh, right.
So there's some connection, and I realised. So it's like so you realise I come to talk about ecotourism, don't you? So a lunch for 300 business people,
And did you actually turn up for it, or did they cancel you?
They cancelled it. I didn't actually what happened when I wrote to them. They didn't even reply. I think I don't know what happened. But anyway,
You haven't ever turned up anywhere and people have thought, hang on a minute, he looks a bit
quite often I've turned up, but to review hotels and things, and the owner's son's invited all his friends round. Or the owner himself. One place I went to, someone he collected all the magazines. There was a Top Gear magazine, I think, and he collected them all, and he wants to kind of talk through everything about that. Even when he realised I wasn't here, he still wanted to come and talk about it. So. We're polar opposites actually. I mean, we're not too different, but he's a journalist, isn't he, really, and I was, and about the same age, really. But no, we're kind of poles apart, really. But he has written a bit about, things like electric cars and things like that.
Right.
It becomes even more confusing. Yeah.
Oh, is he trying to cash in on your name? Maybe that's.
Well, yes.
Everyone thinks I'm green. I better start living up to the other Richard Hammond. Bizarrely, my father used to get mistaken for Richard Attenborough when he was younger, apparently.
Oh, really?
He once signed an autograph because he just thought, well, they've asked for it.
It's amazing what I've realised. When I did the Clean Break book, it was for Rough Guides 10 years ago, and sort of on the back of the Guardian column, really. I had to travel quite a lot of far-flung areas, and it's amazing how well known Top Gear is, not just in the UK. I mean, I was walking in, New Zealand, people would be thinking I was him and wanting to chat about it.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's one of those franchises that's gone around the world, like Mr. Bean. Everybody knows Mr. Bean. It's extraordinary how famous that is all over the world. Do you remember, everybody, if you've got any questions or comments you want to ask Richard about eco-traveling or anything like that, please do put them in the chat. Just he won't know anything about Top Gear. Okay, well, he might do. I don't know. But so Green Traveller, the company, the website. Tell us about your kind of biggest successes, the kind of things that people are most interested in.
Well, I think I think people understand now about climate change is happening, and quite a lot of people now I think are quite green in terms of their day-to-day living, whether they put out recycling or they or just think in a more of a green-minded way, whether they think actually we'll walk to work rather than drive, or there's little sort of things that most people a lot of people are doing now. But I think when it comes to holidays, it's a lot harder for people to understand, well, actually, how can you translate that into going on a holiday? Because whether it's staying in a hotel, which is huge resource issues, or going abroad, flying abroad, how do you actually deal with the carbon emissions associated with flying? And so it was to set out just tips really for how to actually think about going on a break, whether it's a weekend break or whether it's for a longer holiday in the UK or abroad, far-flung areas. It was kind of try and attempt to sort of show people what are the options available. To sort of handheld really, and say, well, actually, this is what you can do, and there are some very simple things that can make a big difference.
Tell us what they are.
Well, the biggest thing obviously is trying to see if there's a way of not being able to fly to where you go. Obviously anywhere in the UK you can pretty much you don't need to fly really. Unless you really need to get somewhere very quickly. Go from go from Cornwall to Scotland, say, so that can be quite difficult. It can be a long route to the north of England by train. But usually when we go on holiday, we have a bit more time, we have leisure, a bit more leisurely. We're not going at commuter hour. And often people's experience of trains in this country is a busy commuter hour time, and it's expensive and busy. But if you take the more leisurely time, go at the weekends or just off peak, it's a much more pleasurable experience. And traveling by train, for instance, to the north of England, especially if you go up the east coast, fantastic. The views, you sort of castle hop as you go all the way up to Edinburgh, or even taking the sleeper is brilliant. So really, and there's a step difference, between taking the train and flying. I mean, it's in the UK, it's 5 or 6 times, better in terms of carbon emissions. If you take a train over, take the Eurostar over to Paris, Brussels, or Lille, it's a saving of 10 times. So you're looking at sort of 30, 40 kilograms of carbon when you take the train, 500 kilograms. If you're flying to, especially in sort of southern Europe, and these days, Eurostar is plugged into the high-speed network of rail network of Europe. It's a brilliant experience, and I think once you've tried it, it's such a nice way to travel.
Oh, so much better than flying. I find flying a necessary evil, but I really wish I could go everywhere by train and boat. If I could, I would, but as you said, often it's a time factor. The other thing that obviously is a big problem, which I think as a nation we need to address, is the cost of train travel. And particularly, I was recently looking to go to Vienna by train. It was going to cost nearly £500, and the flights didn't end up going anyway, but the flights were coming in at kind of 150, and I thought that's so wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we do to get the train companies to address that and to actually start making it more accessible? Because £500 return to Vienna plus hotels is not a cheap weekend away. So what? Well,
I mean, there are huge efforts. I mean, the European train companies. The thing is, in the past, SNCF in France, Renfe in Spain, Deutsche Bahn in Germany, and all the other ones. They're all about moving people around their own countries. They've not really ever looked at. It's not because it was with flying. It's going from country to country often. With trains, it's within a country. So it's actually, they've all got different tracks. They've got different ticketing systems, which are hugely complicated. Yeah. So they're trying to tie those in, and that's been the problem. But they're all getting together now, and they have actually been talking for several years about how they can put those together. I mean, one of the things I would say is, booking that trip to Vienna, always try and kind of split the ticket. It makes a big difference. They get that London to Paris or London to Lille. Often it's better to change in Lille because you can just change platform. Rather than in Paris, you often have to change station.
Take the metro and everything,
Yeah, and a lot of trains go from Lille off east.
That's a great tip for everybody. Change at Lille, not Paris. Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. I mean, the thing is, it is really nice to go to Paris. And I always like going to. There's a Gare de Lyon, which is the station in the south that goes south. There's an amazing restaurant there called the Tram Bleu.
Yes, I've been there.
Have you? Isn't it incredible? And it's a kind of beautiful, great fin de siècle, turn of the century, absolutely, and the food's amazing, and it's a great way to kind of kick off a train journey south. And also, there are palm trees in it, things. You sort of think, gosh, you're heading south to South France, and you look on the notice board, and you see all these amazing destinations like Annecy and Saint-Tropez that you can reach, in Nice and Marseille, and it's I love that.
Plus, it's always that wonderful Monet painting of the Gare de Lyon. So every time I go there, I think it looks the same. It looks exactly the same. We've got a couple of people here who are already trainophiles, which is great. Right. Jane says, I'm going to Barcelona by train next week. Very excited. Oh, wonderful. Rebecca says,
you can do that in a day now, I think. If she's going in a day, I mean, you can, if you're anywhere near London, you can actually get from St Pancras to Barcelona. And it actually does. I think I did in November. There's a sort of 7 o'clock train in the morning. Got there before 7 o'clock in the evening. It was so civilized, And you have it's those double-decker bus trains as well from Paris. You get fantastic views over the hedges toward the countryside. Yeah.
It is lovely. And now that you can get to Amsterdam in 4 hours from London, that's just amazing to me. Yeah. Rebecca says, we've taken the Eurostar when we went to Euro Disney, and we've been to Paris on the coach and went over by ferry. See, I just think that's such a fun way to travel. I find air travel really, really
it becomes part of the holiday then. I mean,
exactly.
One of the, I mean, this is quite a long way, but to get to Morocco is eminently feasible. And I tell you, the journey through Spain, it progressively becomes more Moorish, and you start becoming more assimilated into the North African sort of mindset and culture. And actually, when you get to southern Spain, you have a nice tapas meal, staying overnight in the Airbnb, and then take the ferry across in the morning. You cross the Straits of Gibraltar, and you have the Rock of Gibraltar. You pass it on your left on the ferry, and then ahead of you is the continent of Africa. It's an amazing way to arrive.
I remember the first time I went to Gibraltar, and I was standing in my hotel room looking on the balcony and thinking, oh my God, that's Africa just then. It's just such an incredible feeling of knowing that you can just take the ferry over there. We've got a comment here from Sue. I love this. We traveled from Cheltenham to the Isle of Skye in the spring using rail and the ferry. It was great, but the cost was roughly double than if we'd flown, which is what's deeply frustrating, isn't it? Yeah, that's what I really think, we need so many things that we need,
address. Exactly the cost of the environment. That's the issue, isn't it? We need to. I mean, really, probably need to. If you don't really like this, but we need to somehow tax aviation fuel. Really, it's out of that tax, or somehow. I mean, even Michael Leary is saying that flying has been too cheap or is too cheap.
I know, and he's the biggest problem, because he's the one that everyone's dumbed down to join his the guy from Ryanair. He's made all other airlines dumb down so much, and I find it deeply frustrating.
I mean, the thing is, those no-frills airlines, they did an amazing job sort of, making these places accessible, and you can go, and it sort of changed the way of people traveling. People used to have generally one long summer holiday a year, and now they're having, multiple holidays throughout the year, because they can take these no-frills. It just needs to be factored in, the cost of the environment, and train travel shouldn't be, for it to be twice the cost is ridiculous, especially when with the issues about the environment, also just in terms of the cost of living crisis that we're facing now. We need to really address it.
Absolutely. I mean, train travel just needs to come down in price, doesn't it? Because it's gone up so much. And now that people are staying in their cars because of the pandemic, and there's no incentive for them to get out of their cars and use trains, because they've put up the price of trains so much. It's absolutely crazy. And that's something I wish that local government would address, because I think they need to get people back onto, kind of into trains and out of their own cars to really, we've got a lot going on at the moment about air pollution, and I know you have young children, that fear, and a lot of people here have young children or grandchildren. There is that fear that, the pandemic has made what, everything that was starting to get greener, less green. And I hope that we can get back to that. I want to talk at this point about greenwashing. So tell us what it is and how we can avoid it.
Well, it's like, there's the carbon issue in terms of the transport, but there's also things like hotels. And it's a huge part of, the carbon footprint of a holiday, for instance, 70% is normally getting there. And then you've got this other 30%. And actually, there are lots of hotels that, do fantastic things in terms of minimizing their impact. You sometimes, if you think of your visit, you're staying somewhere for 7 days, it times that by the 300 people in the hotel, and all the laundry that you're doing, and all the food that you're eating, and the use of the swimming pool. Hotels can be huge, black holes of energy. So a lot of hotels are now doing a lot to kind of reduce that, and other companies are kind of, if you like, jumping on the bandwagon of what's green by sort of telling people how green they are, because they see what other people are doing, and this rise of the kind of conscious consumer now. People are more interested in traveling, in being green consumers in general, but also when they travel, being a green traveler. And I think the problem is that so many people are seeing that as a kind of trend, if you like, and are trying to kind of capitalize and surf the green wave. So you have to be very careful to sort of understand, well, what is actually a green place to stay, for instance, and what isn't. And it can be actually very difficult, I think, when you're a traveller, because you turn up at a place and you see the recycling bins, and you think, oh yeah, they're doing quite a good work here. But what you don't see is behind the scenes there's some big oil burner perhaps that's powering the whole hotel. And conversely, you can turn up and not see any recycling. You think, oh, this place isn't very green, but actually they've got some fantastic alternative energy, source that's powering the whole place. So what a lot of hotels are going through is the sort of certification scheme now. And there are many of these schemes. I mean, there are over 150 worldwide, so it can be a bit complicated trying to figure out to tell what one from the other. But the best ones are when you are nationally led, so you can sort of compare like with like within a country, because the issues in Spain are very different to those issues in the Caribbean, to those in South America. So, and actually now places like Booking.com, the big online travel agencies, even Google now flag up those hotels that have gone through this certification process, which is great
to be looking out for. But are they not all green? Is that the problem? They're going.
Yeah, no, they generally are. They generally will have made steps, because they've been, these certification bodies have been accredited by a third-party independent auditor. So someone's gone in, checked them out. So they generally are at various stages of the journey. The issue is that you often have to pay to go through this whole process. So, and there are lots of great places to stay, that don't want to go through that. I mean, they sort of feel like, well, we're doing great things, so why do we should pay someone to tell us that we're great? So, and often, I think to try and get through that, you look at what places are kind of, what are genuinely heartfelt. You get a sense of that when you look at the brochure and the website and the social media, and you speak to people that have been there and say, what, do you get a sense that these people are really genuinely committed? And often you can see it in a website where it's not just scribbled away in one corner of the website saying, sustainable tourism. It's actually across all their messaging that they're saying when they're talking about, the food that they serve, or the linen in the bedroom, or how whether or not they might pick you up from the bus stop or the train station. It's things like that. So, that's one way to kind of tell the green from the greenwash.
Yes, I remember recently staying in a hotel that claimed it was all very eco, and we got there, and it had all the things about, we only wash bed linen, when somebody leaves or whatever. Obviously not if you're staying for a fortnight, but and yet everything was covered in plastic because of COVID.
Yeah,
I
right.
thought, oh, this is so frustrating how all these measures that have been put in place and have now been absolutely washed away by everything having to be, you know, individually sanitized and wrapped in plastic before the next guest arrives. And that was deeply frustrating to me. I don't know if you found that yourself when you've been traveling recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did stay in one place recently in Belgium, Brussels, where if you didn't hang your towel up to be washed, you got a €5 token to spend at the bar. You know, and I think that's, you know, because the problem is often with green, and people like to go on holiday, they like to have a good time, forget all their, you know, they don't really want to be sort of told off when you're traveling to have a holiday. So I think it's quite nice to have these things that are actually sort of make it not light of it, but actually make it a bit more of a kind of, oh, wagging your finger the whole time, say, hey, you mustn't do this or that. I think the sort of messaging around it, what I've tried to do with Green Traveller is to kind of promote what are the great things that are out there. You know, what's the experience of taking the train to Barcelona, for instance, and, you know, why is that a joyful experience rather than, you know, it's not all just about sort of not doing things, it's about sort of making a decision to do a better thing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And also just as you said, turning it into the journey so that it's not, I mean, obviously it's different if people are having to rush somewhere, as you said, in a hurry, but if you're going on holiday, I love the fact that the holiday begins when you get to the train station rather than having to, you know, sit at an airport for ages and have all that stress. The most glorious thing, as you said, about if you're going to Paris or changing or whatever, I remember going down to the south of France and it just felt as soon as we got to the Eurostar that we were on holiday already.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, there's a brilliant website called Seat 61. And it's a guy, you know, he's 61, the Seat 61 on Eurostar is the one seating that lines up with the window. You know, it's that kind of attention to detail. I mean, he explains on his website all about, you know, train travel, booking all over the world. But the guy set it up, Mark Smith, told me once that in all the years he's been, you know, writing about train travel, he's never had one complaint about the Harwich to Hook of Holland ferry journey. And it's really nice. You get the train from, you know, anywhere to, at least from Liverpool Street in London, but, you know, any train out to East Anglia, Harwich, and the train actually stops right by the port. So you come off the train, it's almost, you know, it's 100, you know, yard walk to where you board the ferry, and you get on. You can have a meal there, very civilized, before the ferry is departed, and then you go to your cabin, fall asleep, you know, and you're woken up not at sort of 4 a.m, you know, like these, a very civilized hour, and then you get off the ferry, and the train railway station is right there again, so you can zip off to Rotterdam and Amsterdam. It's a really nice alternative way, you know, get to places. And you know, the difference of that is that actually it's just a really nice way of traveling, and the holiday does start when you're having a nice meal on a ferry because you're feeling like you're moving, going somewhere.
Yes. Yeah, you're already on the holiday. That's what's so wonderful about it.
Yeah.
So where have been your favorite places to travel to?
Well, I love Pembrokeshire. You know, I go there every summer. I love the Scottish Isles, of course. You know, you get the good weather. It's amazing. You know, nowhere else like it. But also the Mediterranean. You know, I mean, it's so easy to get the train down a ferry. You know, I did an article for that Guardian column, was taking the train down to Nice and then ferry hopping across Corsica, Sardinia, and Sicily, and then taking the train all the way back from Italy. And you know, from Sicily back to the mainland, they put the train on a ferry. It's just really long.
It's incredible.
And it just, those islands are all so interesting and different. And you know, that kind of slow travel, you know, trip, you can be much more spontaneous because you're not dashing to catch the flight. And of course, the thing is, if you miss a flight, you know, you have to, it's very expensive to get another one, and the stress of it and everything. Whereas actually, if you're catching the ferry, you don't get it, you get the next one, you know, or the train, and that's it changes the whole ambience of travel. So I love that, and equally with, you know, the Balearics, going down, you know, via Spain out to Menorca, Ibiza, and Formentera. Those are all, you know, they're so nice destinations, and it's great you can actually get to them without having to sort of immediately think, right, I'm going to click for the flight button. So I'd say those. I mean, but also I love Scandinavia. You know, I mean, it's the sort of light years ahead really of most other countries, and things like, you know, cycling control. I mean, really, Copenhagen is. I mean, years ago they were doing brilliant, you know, just as Amsterdam and Utrecht have. But you know, I love in Copenhagen they've got this thing called the Green Wave, where they set the traffic lights for cyclists to go, so that if you cycle at the average cycling speed, you never have to stop all the
Oh,
way
wow,
into the
that's
city.
fantastic. What a great thing to do. Have you
Yeah.
tried that out?
Yes, it worked. Oh
It
yes,
was like all
I
the
think
way.
what is an average cycling speed? So you
Well,
end up going slightly faster than you perhaps you would, because you think you're probably slower than average. No, it's brilliant, and there are all sorts of brilliant things out there. Like West Sweden, some of the islands up there are absolutely stunning. I mean, what more could you want for a holiday? Just fantastic food and great sights, beautiful sunsets. Amazing.
Yeah. Oh. So where is on your bucket list? I mean, where have you never managed to get to that you'd like to? And have you not been?
Well, I haven't really been much to Eastern Europe. I went to Albania recently, loved it. I took the ferry through Italy, and then at Bari the train through Italy, and then got the ferry from Bari across. Bari is a very nice city. I thought sort of at the southeastern end of Italy. I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. It was really nice, and just the overnight ferry is simple, and then to get to Albania, and I loved it. But and Croatia I've been to, but I haven't really been to Slovenia, Slovakia, or Montenegro, some of those amazing countries. So yeah, that's on the to-do list, really.
Yeah, wonderful. So now that you've got children, how do you think your travel goals have changed, or have you found it easier to travel in a green way with children than, because I mean, flying with children, people always say is hellish. So do you think you actually have a better chance of having
well, they sleep really well on ferries, we've noticed, and on sleeper trains. That's the constant motion, I think. So I mean, I don't know if everyone else has had the same experience, but ours definitely did.
I sleep personally so much better on a boat or a ferry. I often think I would love to have a bed on rails just going around my bedroom. If I were an eccentric millionaire, that's what I'd have, so that I could have a bed that went around permanently. That seems like heaven to me.
I mean, the thing with flying with children is that there's a lot of queues you have to stand. You have to queue for the check-in, queue for the thing, everything. And whereas trains, there are a lot less queuing. You get on the train and that's it. So queuing, I find children hate queuing. It's so boring, isn't it? And so that was it. But also, I think there's a lots of particularly the other thing about this the green travel is about wildlife element to it. We are, let's not forget, in a wildlife emergency at the moment. When I was researching the book, I read that there were 15% of the UK's wildlife is currently at threat of extinction. I mean, so often we think about climate change in terms of the threat to the polar bears and the ice caps and the rainforests and in the Amazon, far-flung areas, but actually right here, right now, the changes to the hedgerows, the changes to the wildlife, it's really important. So, and kids love wildlife, it's one thing. So anything we do, I think the wildlife trusts in this country are amazing network, fantastic organizations. So we always try and link into any accommodations that link with them. Quite a lot of them you find actually, they donate to a local charity, be their local wildlife trust. And those little trips that they do to go out and see bats in the evening are just, kids love those.
I went out on one of those one evening in London, in Holland Park, and with the Bat Conservation Trust. And it was absolutely magical, because apart from the fact you're in the park when it's normally closed, they have the little, the sonar microphone so that you can actually hear the bats communicating. And there are so many different species of bat in that park, which you just would never have known. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And I keep asking them if they'll do it again. It's just a wonderful thing to do. If you get the chance, everybody here, if you get the chance to go on a Bat Conservation Trust walk, do it, because it was years ago I did it, and I still remember how fantastic it was.
I think, I mean, a lot of people still drive to go on holiday, and, maybe they don't want to fly, but they take the car, with kids, quite often you do. And actually, the sort of people are wondering how good is that compared with flying. Actually, if you've got two kids, two parents in a car, 4 people traveling in the car, that brings down the carbon footprint quite a lot. So and that's great. And actually, in France, we found some fantastic service stations where they actually really child friendly. We went to one, and it had someone looking after the kids, and then lots of bouncy castle kind of things and zip wires and things at a service station. And the food in the service station, we had things like carrot salads rather than horrible burgers and things. It was just enlightening. You kind of think, gosh, like those motorway service stations on the M5, brilliant, like Gloucester services. You sort of think, why can't all service stations be like this? Well, up in the Lake District as well, they're brilliant, and they've got places for kids to enjoy. They start really enjoying the journey. They look forward to. Okay, we've actually had a play date at Gloucester services.
When you're trying to persuade somebody whose chief lifestyle is constant short breaks, never being concerned about the environment, just getting it as cheap as possible, how would you go about trying to persuade them that actually there is a different way, and that doesn't have to cost the earth either in terms of the environment or in terms of their pockets. Because of course, as you said, with the cost of living, that people are really concerned that being green, frustratingly, is usually the more expensive option. So what would your advice be if somebody
I think, I mean, if you're going to look at possibly taking a train, set up a ticket alert, because the big difference, the reason why people often find train tickets are expensive, especially if you're going abroad, is because you can't book them very far in advance. Whereas flights you can book a year out, but the train you can often only book 4 or 5 months out because they're not released then. But you can set the train line now, works in Europe as well as the UK, and Rail Europe, or in SNCF in France, set up a ticket alert. So you put in where the route you want to do, and it'll send you an email saying when that ticket becomes available, and that's when you can snap up the cheaper tickets.
Yes.
So I'd say that as a fundamental thing. Also look at split ticketing. So don't just, the train lines are great in the search engine now. You can put London to Barcelona, it'll give you the thing. But try and just check to see what London to Paris is and Paris to Barcelona is. Because quite often, and especially if you're going out to Italy or further afield, breaking up the journey. But if you have to make 2 changes, definitely try and see if you can book the trains. And sometimes it might mean staying for an extra couple of hours, having lunch in Milan, for instance. I mean,
no big hardship.
To get that cheaper ticket. I think it can be a huge saving. Sometimes, I was advising someone recently, and they said, "Oh, it cost me £400 to go to Northern Italy," and we actually broke it down. It was £150.
Right.
But it meant her staying for lunch. I can't remember where it was. It might have been Milan. That's why I say it. But there are worse places in the world to stay for lunch than Milan.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just going to post the Seat 61 website as well.
Yeah.
Where I tend to look for my train tickets overseas. Yeah. And I know that you interviewed him a bit in your book as well. You've got a little box.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
People haven't seen this. It's a fantastic website, and it's just a really good way of kind of looking up train journeys around the world.
There's also a company that's set up in the UK. It's called Byway, and it's a travel agency that books no-fly holidays in the UK and in Europe. But they can book your train travel and ferry, say if you go to the Scottish Islands, and a hotel in the UK, and will help you get from the train station to the, help you find out how to get from the train station to the hotel. So they put it all together and you buy it as a package together. And they also do it in Europe as well. So, if you go to somewhere like Corsica, well, actually they'll book the train and the ferry and the hotel for you. They put it together. And it's a fairly new company. It's been going, I think they set up in lockdown, unfortunately, but it's going great guns, and it's really popular. So that's great. C61 is brilliant for information about train and ferry travel, the timetables and how to book. And Byway is good too if you actually want to book a holiday.
That's great. I've just posted both of those. We've got a couple of comments here. So Jane says T-Bay, I don't know if that's how, T-Bay services are lovely. I think that's the one in Cumbria, Jane, isn't it?
Yes.
A friend of mine who lives there recommended that one to me. Sue says a senior rail card is well worth it. You get a third off.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention rail cards. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it does make significant savings, well, especially for families as well. Family rail cards, even couples, 2 for the price of 1 deals. Yeah. And also don't forget the weekend upgrade. Sometimes you can go weekend, you can upgrade to first class if it's really busy. And sometimes it can be sort of only £10 or £15.
Yeah.
And by the time you've had the nice tea and coffee,
and read the paper, Wi-Fi.
Use the Wi-Fi, the saving is not that big a difference. So
I remember doing the Edinburgh Literary Festival once, and my publishers said they would refund my train ticket, but I had to get the cheapest ticket. And I had to explain to them that the cheapest ticket was first class, which it genuinely was, because it was over the Edinburgh Festival. All the standard class tickets had gone. So it was actually £5 cheaper to travel first class to Edinburgh, which was wonderful because I got free Wi-Fi all the way and food.
Well, there's a great website, Seatfrog, which if you put in your trip, they can somehow find out any of those deals where they've reduced the cost of first class or even standard class at different time. But also in Europe, in France particularly, first class is not that much more expensive. And sometimes, if you just want a bit more space, a bit more, a bit of a quieter experience, first class can be the option, and you're not having to spend twice as much like often you do in this country.
Yes, I've just put the link to Seatfrog in as well. Jane has given more good advice. The TGV train gives discounts for over 60s too. So for those of you who are over 60, honestly, look that up, because I'm quite jealous of that. That sounds great. Thank you for that, Sue and Jane and everybody, for your great tips there. That's really good. So some of your articles that you've done things like top 10 campsites to reach on public transport. I'm going to put that one in, actually. That was a Guardian travel one, wasn't it? You've done some really interesting articles, including, which I was very excited about, National Geographic. Tell us about how that came about. How did you get commissioned by National Geographic?
Oh, well, actually back when I was doing the Guardian, just after I had set up Green Traveller, as a forum, National Geographic launched a green magazine. It's called National Geographic Green, and they asked me to be the traveller editor of it. So and it was brilliant because National Geographic is so well known, that the brand of it, and yet this was a kind of UK publication. But and now there's National Geographic Traveller, a whole standalone magazine. And in fact, I did a masterclass last night about sort of how the beginnings of how to be a travel writer on that. And and there are food writers on there and photographers, and they've really sort of caught the imagination, I think, of the traveling community. So they asked me to write looking back at 20 years really. It was the mid-90s, I think, when we looking back over those 20 years, how have things changed in terms of green travel? And that was the articles about that. I've also just written something for them about how to travel sustainably on a budget, as well, and something for the big issue as well on that as well. And because often that's the big barrier. People think, you have to be, you have to pay a lot of money. But conversely, a lot of people also think that green travel is about budget. It's about camping, and it's about staying in youth hostels and volunteering and hedge laying in a wet weekend kind of thing. So, and it is that, but it's also, and it's about these far-flung conservation holidays. But it's about everything in between. It's really about any kind of travel now. There are choices that you can make to make it.
Of course.
Green.
I posted a link because you wrote something for the FT, didn't you? And tell us about the reaction to that, about that article, and what.
Well, it was interesting because there was this this idea that the perception of green is either it's budget or it's very expensive. And so kind of over the years, I've always tried through Green Travel to sort of try and hit the middle ground and say, well, if you're going to go and stay in a villa for a week in Ibiza, or to go to Tenerife like you normally do, or somewhere in Spain, here's how to go about having making a greener choice, a greener villa, a greener way to get there. And also, actually, it's fundamentally, before I forget to say this, is that a lot of it is about food, the food that you eat while on holiday, and that has a huge difference. If you're trying to find that, go to the local markets, or even at the restaurant, trying to select the locally produced food rather than food that's been flown in, it makes a huge difference to footprint of your holiday. And also, it's better for the local community. And you have to remember that you're visiting these places where people live; it's their homes. And
and I think that one of the biggest things is not to eat endangered species when you're in another country. I know that just frustrates people. Go to Iceland and they go, I just want to try whale just this once, and that kind of thing to me is deeply frustrating, that people think that when you're on holiday your behavior can change, and something that would horrify you at home is something that's acceptable.
Exactly. And I think even like traveling at home, like so the FT article was about how to spend a green weekend in London. And what the feedback I got from it was that people were saying, it's amazing, you can actually still have quite a nice luxury experience, and it can be greener. The hotel that I recommended was a hotel that was just newly opened, and it's a really, really they've done so much, not just about in terms of their environmental initiatives, but they've got all the soft furnishings they've commissioned from really good organizations that benefit people with mental health issues, or with who've been excluded from society, things like that. So they're really good. So it's not just about the environment, it's about benefiting the neighborhood in which the hotel lives. And that's really important, especially in big urban environments.
What's the name of that hotel? Give them a shout out on this.
Oh yes, let me guess. Let me write. I've just
oh, sorry.
Can we put it in the notes for it?
I've put the link to the FT article in the chat. Yes.
Yeah. We actually had the launch of my book there as well. So it's brilliant. And it's near Paddington. There are 2 hotels, and this is the latest one. And you can reach there. And actually, the article in the FT was all about jumping on the Elizabeth line. Now you can whiz across London quite quickly, get up to the east, all the way up to the Olympic Park and all of that. And it's a brilliant way of getting around London now, using the tubes and the buses. But also the big thing I recommend is going on the canals, because the canals in London are brilliant, and they all, because they're so old, and they go to all the interesting places. So I, if I can, if I go to London, I'll walk along the canals or cycle. I used to take a bike and cycle along them. But it's go to these community farms and these brilliant restaurants, and there are so many different things you can do. But the thing was, people say, can you actually have a luxury stay, can you? It's like, you can. You don't have to sacrifice things.
associated with the fact that, you know, you've got to be in a campsite somewhere, hasn't it? So I think it's great that you're actually showing that's not what you can do. You can actually do the kind of things you like doing, just making conscious choices, which I guess is exactly what your subtitle is all about.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and it's a joyful experience, and it's healthier, and it has all sorts of ancillary benefits.
Yeah. So when your children are at school, the people say, "What do you mean you haven't flown?" Do they are they kind of stunned that they've never been?
Well, you know, I think their, you know, their frame of reference is, I mean, they're more likely, yeah, but we went to Pembrokeshire and it was amazing. You know, we go to the same place every year, and they love the familiarity of it. And it's actually a place that I went to when I was that's what I'd say, when I was a child. So, and it's a beautiful part of the world, and you know, and it's we camp, and it's very simple. It's next to the sea, and we just, you know, have a good time. And you know, I think,
About wild swimming as well, haven't you? Are you a keen wild swimmer? Am I right about that?
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, when I was living in London, I used to go to Tooting Lido all the time. I loved it, and then, you know, it was actually the sort of baptism I heard of that was, I was at Glastonbury one year, one of those rainy Glastonburys, and you know, had to leave, left in the middle of the night in the mud, and got the bus to Castle Cary and the train to by Bristol to Penzance, and then the ferry across to St Mary's, and then, you know, eventually a ferry to a smaller island, and then the tractor to the campsite. The whole thing took 18 hours. I met with a friend who said, "Oh, you know, you smell a bit," you know, because you really got the thing. It was that, you know, it was then at June, the water was cold. He said, "Why didn't you just go for a swim?" And we jumped in the sea, and it was just like a baptism. I was like, "Oh my goodness," it was so kind of refreshing. And actually, although it was cold, after, once you're in for a while, you have to be with somebody who says, "No, just stay in for a bit longer," and you realise your body warms up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, and that was 20 years ago. But you know, I do swim a lot. Yeah, yeah. I love it, and it's really taken. It's one of those niche subjects that has become mainstream now.
Yes. Yeah, and people are suddenly, so I don't know if anyone here on Goldster has tried wild swimming, but you know, that feeling of being being somewhere beautiful. I remember when I was living in New Zealand, going swimming a lot in lakes, which is my favorite kind of swimming. It's just an amazing feeling. But unlike you, Richard, I'm not a massive fan of freezing cold water. I do like to be somewhere.
Well, you know, where I go is a place called Goldster Key, and it's a kind of scuba diving place, but there are lots of women of all ages, a lot over 50, 60, who go there and swim, and they love it, you know, whole groups of them. And you know, the other thing as well, I think about that, particularly that sort of age group, is electric cycling is really taking off, and it has really enabled people to actually think, I can cycle, you know, and actually go on an electric bike. And even with kids, you know, when we used to live in Bath and it was very hilly, we had an electric bike. We could put the boys on the back, and you could, and it just, for my wife, it was so important for her to get out of, you know, she was working from home, to actually even go out. And even though there wasn't massive health benefits of pedaling, you actually got the benefit of just being outside and taking the kids to school. And it was a real game changer. And now I think there were 7 or 8 other families now that are cycling electric bikes, and you know, so it's great for young kids, but it's also great for older people who think, actually, you know, I can actually do those hills with an electric bike at the touch of a button.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, you've mentioned your wife, which was very neat, because I was about to actually say your wife has a new book out, doesn't she, as well? So you're a 2-book family.
Yes, we had to share the communal shed writing our books, and I got it between 5 and 7 in the morning. But you know, it's a book. It's called Rustle Up. It's called 1 Paragraph Recipes, and it's sort of very simple. So simple recipes that you can, just a paragraph, so you have to trawl through lots of you know, the menu and ingredients and things, and just in a nutshell how to cook. It's flavor without the fuss, I think, is the strapline. And it's brilliant. She wrote it with a co-author, Laura Rowe, who's the I think she's the editor of, they worked at Olive magazine, the food magazine. Renee was the travel editor, and Laura was the food editor, was the overall editor.
And so her name is Rhiannon Batten, for anyone who's looking it up, but I've also put yes, Rebecca says, a multi-talented household, very impressive.
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't do it by design, and we ended up having the same publisher, you know, completely by coincidence, and even the same editor. And we were very fortunate because she was a brilliant editor. But yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to tell everybody what's coming up next, and then when we're going to come back to you, if you can give us your top 3 tips of how people can instantly go greener. But I'm just going to tell everyone what's coming up first, so you've got a couple of minutes to think about that.
All right, think about that.
So let me just find so coming up on Goldster over the next couple of weeks. So on Thursday next week, Humphrey is talking to Robert Sawyer. And then on Friday, he's talking to Jake Needham, who is hailed as Asia's most stylish writer of crime fiction. And then the week after that, I'll be back on the Thursday with Nicola Solomon, who is the chief exec of the Society of Authors, which I hope Richard's a member of. And the Society of Authors is just such an interesting organization. She's going to be talking about the history of the Society of Authors. It's got a very long history, and the estates, the authors' estates that they manage. And then on Friday, the 21st of October, I'm going to be talking to Alison Hill. Now, she is talking about her new biography of Pauline Gower, who was one of the Spitfire pilots in the Second World War. And Alison has done an extraordinary amount of work and interviewed lots of female pilots from the Second World War, the kind of pilots who've been totally overlooked. And she's really incredible, the way that she gets to know all these people and their stories. It's fantastic. And then on Tuesday next week, I'm going to be talking to life coach Denise McGahn on our sister program, PPG, who she has a new book out. It's called Midlife, and it's talking about having a new perspective, an alternative way of living in your middle to later years, and just changing your goals so that you illuminate more of your potential and have a future full of more meaning and fulfillment, is what I've got written down, but I know Denise is going to talk about it in a much better way than I can. And then on the Tuesday, the 18th on PPG, Humphrey is talking to Lynn O'Donnell, who is a war correspondent. As you know, that Humphrey has these amazing connections. And of course, I hope you've been following our PPGs with Rosie Stancer, our wonderful presenter, who's also an explorer. And her Sinai crossing expedition team, which of course, as we know, has come up with political problems recently, has got problems with their expedition. And one of the things that she would really appreciate this conversation today, because one of the things that she is highlighting is climate change, and as an explorer, how she has really seen the toll that climate change is taking on the world. So do log into any of those, and any that you've missed. Adam did a brilliant interview with her earlier this week. So please do look up on the PPG website and look for the event recordings. And as you know, any of the book club interviews that you've missed, you can also just scroll down on the page, find event recordings, and they'll be on there. And please tell your friends that this one will be up as well in the next couple of days if they've missed it. So Richard, what are your top tips that you can share with us?
Okay, top tip is to name the hotel in London that I forgot earlier. It's Inhabit Hotels.
Inhabit Hotels.
Inhabit Queen's Gardens. That's the new one that they've opened. So there you go. Inhabit. Top tips. Well, I'd take the train if you can, and and use places like Seat 61. Book a holiday through someone like Byway. That would be the difference. Choose the train rather than the plane if it's possible to. If you're flying, then look at ways of choosing. Rather go direct. Don't try and kind of take two flights. That would be the thing. And there are different airlines have different ways of different operating procedures, and some are quite a lot greener than others. So it's worth digging around and seeing what are the available options for that. And sometimes you can see greener flights now. Some of the search engines show the carbon emissions of flights now, and trying to choose the one. But really, the big difference is if you can try not to fly, particularly in the UK, and particularly short haul into Europe, because now the train is an amazing way to get there. Then the other thing is to look for greener places to stay. Try and find those hotels that are doing them, whether that's a small locally run hotel. They're often brilliant, heartfelt run, or even the bigger hotels. If your default thing is that you always want you stay in a big all-inclusive, or you stay in a big hotel you always go to, shop around a bit and see if there are those that are doing much more to kind of limit their, for instance, their use of water, particularly in countries in southern Spain. It's such a big issue. And some of those hotels have done fantastic things now to kind of limit how much they're doing. So I'd say try and choose that, and use some of these certification bodies. So when you look on booking.com, or if you look on Google, or even if you're going with someone like TUI, one of the big tour operators, they now flag up. There's a certification team called Travel Life in there. So look out for the Travel Life logo, and it's bronze, silver, gold, and try and go for the gold ones. And often you'll find there's a parity in price. You're not paying any more for these hotels.
Absolutely. That's the thing.
And then the third, sorry, Lucinda.
No, it's good to be aware of that, because I think people have got this misconception that it always has to be more expensive, and it really doesn't have to be. So.
And then the third thing is food. There's a survey that was done recently looking at the carbon footprint of a holiday, and it found that food waste was the second biggest contributor. And that's just often you go to countries, and particularly places like Greece and Italy, there's in Spain there's a culture of providing lots of food, and you end up leaving lots on your plate. And you imagine that 7 times, if you're a week, and all the people that are staying there, all year round, it's a huge amount. So I think, try and be a bit more sort of choosing food that you're going to eat, not leaving too much, but also really focus on those places that sell local seasonal food. And when I say local, I mean, see if they name the businesses, and ideally the people behind the businesses, because you get that connection with things. There's a brilliant restaurant in Cornwall called Prawn on the Lawn, if you know of it. And on there, they say a list of all the businesses and all the people that they buy from locally. So it's not just, we buy within 10 miles. It's actually, we buy this business from this person. And on Thursdays, you may see Joe coming in his oilskins with his catch. It's that, and you get all of a sudden you get this immediate connection with the locality, and how your visiting there will help benefit them. So I think that's the transport, it's the hotels, and it's the food.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant and such a joy to see you again after all these years. And I know at least one of our old colleagues has turned up, because I had a message from Leslie who says hello.
Oh, Leslie, brilliant. Okay.
So thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. It's great to see you all. And thank you, Adam, who's here, for filling in for me yesterday. I really do appreciate it, Adam. And I will see you in a couple of weeks' time. You've got Humphrey next week on the book club, but if you're around on Tuesday, please do come along to my PPG with Denise, which will be really fascinating. So take care, and thank you for your messages. Thank you, Jane. That's really nice. And Pauline says, I met 2 guys this week with electric bikes, and I'm amazed by how versatile they are. You see, my problem with that is I've always been rubbish at riding a bike. So I need an electric tricycle. That's what I need. I need 3
Well,
wheels.
they exist, any kind of bikes available.
I keep trying to find one that someone wants to give away. If anyone knows anyone wanting to give away a tricycle, let me know. I think I'm a hazard on the road on 2 wheels. So take care, everybody. And I will see you next week. Richard and I will turn off our videos now. And I will see you on Tuesday or the week after on book club. Take care.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.